All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Tuesday, January 7th, right here on your Daily Fix for all things Texas Longhorns. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson. This is brought to you by Rogue Sports Network, and you can hear us on YouTube or watch us on YouTube and hear us where all podcasts can be heard, whether that's Spotify or whatever your device is. We are coming out with episodes this week, Monday through Friday, leading up to the Texas game. So please like, share, subscribe, have your alerts on because we have changed the schedule out a little bit. We were doing Tuesday through Saturdays, and our immediate reactions coming on that Saturday. Obviously, they are playing on Friday, so we will have our immediate reaction following the Cotton Bowl game. So with all that being said, Jake, we have discussed and closed the chapter on Arizona State. We're going to talk Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, where this team is. We're going to have a couple of conversations on the true definition of all gas, no brakes, and what that means to you and me, what that means to other fans, and why there's some sort of discourse. You know, I'm going to start it this way, Jake. Texas is in the semifinal for the second straight year as one of the final four teams in the country competing for a national championship for 2 years in a row. And yet there are still some fans out there that aren't quite satisfied with how Texas has been playing. So we're going to get into that here shortly. But it will be the first time that these two teams have played against each other, Jake, since the Fiesta Bowl in 2007, where the Colt McCoy to Quan Cosby game-winning touchdown with 6 seconds remaining. And I kind of want to talk about that game a little bit, just go down memory lane. But Texas is opening this game up as 6-point underdogs, going into Dallas, where they should have a somewhat home crowd, if you will, is much closer to Austin than it is Columbus, Ohio. So, Jake, your thoughts on opening the game at a 6-point spread as the underdog for the first time this season for Texas? We've seen Texas be favored against Georgia. We've seen not once, but twice. We've seen them being favored over Michigan to start the season off at Michigan. We've seen them favored over Oklahoma, over Texas A&M. First time this season we've seen this Texas team going into a game as an underdog.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. You have to have Ohio State favored by about a touchdown. If you look at the way Ohio State's played in these last two games, and then, you look at Texas, they're coming off a game where they struggled and was kind of a weird game. And you have Ohio State just absolutely destroying really good opponents. It seems like losing to Michigan somehow helped them. It does. We've known all year they're the most talented team in the country. Just objectively, they are. And by every talent metric, they are. But they weren't really playing up to that most of the season. Part of that's level of competition. I mean, they don't need to. And then they lose to Michigan. And then that just ignited something in them, because they were up 21-0 on Tennessee in the first quarter. They were up 34-0 in Oregon in the second quarter. So yeah, I mean, if you're a betting man right now, I think most people are probably going to be betting Ohio State, because that line opened at, I think, 5 or 5.5, swung to 6.5. And then it's kind of bounced between 6 and 6.5.
Yeah.
And
depending on where you look. Yeah.
That's one of those lines that where when game day hits, I could see it jump into 7.5. Because I just think a lot of people are going to buy into Ohio State for this game. And why wouldn't you with how they played?
Yeah. And Jake, I think that opens up a great conversation where Sark finally gets to kind of play this us against the world mentality, the Kirby Smart, game plan going against Texas, and no one believes in us, and everyone is taking Ohio State, and everyone, on the outside looking into these two programs, if you just watch the playoff games, should be taking Ohio State. Jake, you and I are probably leaning Ohio State in this game, to be completely honest with everybody. And so it's just one of those things. And so I think that can play to an advantage where Texas has been favored, and you haven't really been able to play the no one believes in you card like the Kansas City Chiefs do every single year, even though they're Super Bowl favorites for whatever reason they put in their head that they are underdogs. It works. It still works. And so Sark being able to pull that off, I think could play a huge factor in getting this team prepared for Ohio State. And Jake, I want to go back on a history lesson. Go back to 2005, the national championship game where Texas was the underdog against USC. Nobody had Texas winning that game. Nobody, except for maybe Lee Corso right before the game where he picked Texas with his game day gear headset pick. But everybody had USC going into that Texas game. And then, fast forward a few years, and everybody had Alabama beating Texas in the national championship. That did happen, but Texas completely outplayed them while Colt McCoy was still playing. And I'm going to go on record and saying Colt McCoy wins that game if he stays in that game and wins the national championship for Texas over Alabama. There's been countless other bowl games, Georgia, Texas in the Sugar Bowl with Sam Ehlinger, where Texas was the underdog and shouldn't have won that game, came out victorious. You can look back at regular season games, whether that be a Texas-Notre Dame game with Tyron Swoops leading the charge with the 18-wheeler package. Texas not supposed to win that game, comes out, wins that game. 2019 against LSU, Texas very easily could have won that game if Keontae Ingram catches a touchdown pass in the end zone and Seta drops it. Texas could win that game against the eventual national champions. So I don't think Texas is just going to come into this game, roll over lightly, and it's just going to be a Ohio State slaughter.
No, but at the same time, I could see it just not because of Texas, but because Ohio State just looks
is that good?
Scary. Looks scary these last 2 weeks. And I said it a couple weeks ago that, or when I picked Texas over Oregon, I go, I hope Oregon beats Ohio State because Texas matches up better against Oregon, because Oregon has a side of the ball that is not as strong as the other. Ohio State's really strong on both sides of the ball. They are a complete football team. Whereas Oregon's defense was clearly not a national championship stud, crazy level defense. And that ended up hurting them because when their offense slowed down, the defense was not able to keep them in the game. But at the same time, I do think there's matchups for Texas in this game. And Texas does a good job of that when they're underdogs. And they've done that with Steve Sarkisian when they've been underdogs. They were underdogs a lot his first year. And they typically got out the leads, but couldn't hold them because the roster count was just horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw a discussion on X about, well, when's the last time that Sarkisian even showed up as an underdog and played well, literally like the last time they were an underdog, which was at Tuscaloosa. That was like the last time they were an underdog, and they won.
And they won that game. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. And thank you for adding to my history lesson of when Texas is an underdog, they typically come up and they play well. And regardless if it's a win or a loss, they come up and play well. Jake, in 2007 in the Fiesta Bowl, we saw one of the more historic moments in Texas football history with a Colt McCoy 30-yard touchdown pass to Quan Cosby with 6 seconds remaining. Touchdown, Texas. We will always quote the broadcaster adding a T in there on Texas. And so, one of the great games. I wanted to kind of go down memory lane. Some notable players and performances. Colt McCoy was 41 of 58, 414 yards with 3 total touchdowns. He did have a rushing touchdown in this game as well. It was that badass, like him spinning into the end zone, doing the whole like spread the arms over the goal line play. That was freaking cool. And then Quan Cosby had 14 receptions, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the game winner. And Jordan Shipley with 10 receptions, 78 yards receiving. You had Fozzie Whitaker as your starting running back. You had Roy Miller on the defense, Brian Arakpo, both Sam and Emmanuel Acho brothers. Sergio Kendall was on this team, some just badass edge players. And then your secondary was pretty sweet as well. Blake Gideon, Earl Thomas. And then you had a freshman punter, Justin Tucker, not yet kicking field goals for the Burn Orange and White at that point in his career yet.
It's funny. You go back to that game as well. Talk about Colt McCoy's stats. They only had 24 points in that game, and it took them a long time to score a touchdown. Mm-hmm. If Twitter existed back then, or at least was to the level it is now, people have been melting down that whole game. Yeah. That game was 6-3 Ohio State. I think, at halftime. It was 6-3. Texas didn't score their first touchdown until the third quarter. They scored 21 points in that second half. People would have been losing their minds at halftime going, Colt McCoy sucks. He's not going to end up being that good of a quarterback for his legacy, all this type of stuff.
Yep.
But yet
he's no Vince Young. He's no Vince Young. Yeah. You know why? Because there's only one Vince Young. I hate when people say that. It's, well, he's no Tom Brady. Well, he's no this. Well, yeah. There's only one of those who has ever existed.
Which will be one of our, to tease an off-season talking point. We will have a talking point about how the Tom Brady's, the Nick Sabans of the world have completely corrupted the
what
minds
success
of
looks
of
yeah.
fans
Yeah, and
of
what
what
success looks
success
like.
is.
Yeah. On the other side of things, this Ohio State team in 2007, Jake, Terrell Pryor was splitting snaps. I believe it was with Beckman or something. Anyway, Terrell
Todd
Pryor.
Bookman or something like that.
Yeah. So Terrell Pryor had 66 passing yards, 78 rushing yards, and he had a receiving touchdown as well. So just because he wasn't lighting it up on terms of yardage, he was still making big plays for OSU. Beanie Wells, 16 carries, 106 yards. You had the future NFL stars and Alex Boone on the offensive line, Cam Hayward on the defensive line, James Laurinaitis, he was roided up like crazy, and then Malcolm Jenkins. So you could probably make the argument that although they had probably less notable players on that Ohio State team, they had better NFL talent on that Ohio State team, and which has made them, as good and as competitive of a game as that was. But just kind of fun to go down memory lane and look at the last time these two teams matched up against one another.
It's funny. You look at that game's box score too. It's kind of what the box score might need to look like for Texas to win this game, at least on the offensive side.
Low scoring, ugly.
Texas didn't run the ball well. They averaged 1.9 yards a carry. They had 54 yards rushing, and they had 459 yards passing, or 414 yards passing from McCoy. That's weird. Their box score does not add up on that. But yeah, I mean, you had a passing attack that led the way for Texas to win that game. And it's just kind of funny looking at that and going, that might be how the box score needs to look for Texas to win this game. From the Ohio State side, you're probably going to see them throw the ball more than they did in that game. So it's a little different from Ohio State.
Will Howard does have the ability to run. Now, he hasn't needed to use that ability as often, especially with the weapons that he has on the outside and the running backs that he has at his disposal at Ohio State, but he does have the ability to run. If he needs to, he can. I don't think he's as elusive and squirrely as Sam Levitt is. He's more of kind of a downhill runner. He's kind of more of your Tim Tebow's in a way, but it does still possess that ability. And Jake, whoever loses this game, fun fact, that'll be their next game to start the 2025 season, week 1, Texas, Ohio State. So whoever loses this game,
think about that.
Whoever loses this game has a chance at redemption very early on to start next season.
Yeah, and it'll be two pretty different looking teams. At least new quarterbacks. I know Ohio State has some skill position guys that'll be back, but I know they have some offensive line turnover just like Texas does. They'll be losing some defensive guys. So
two new quarterbacks, Will Howard and Quinn Ewers, will not be starting next year for these two respective teams.
There's a lot of storylines in this game. Quinn obviously was at Ohio State, only recruit from that class to beat Michigan for Ohio State. And now he'll get a chance to beat Ohio State. Started his career there, obviously. And then you have the fact that they're going to be playing each other week 1 next year. What a way to start out the Arch era. And then Ohio State.
And these two teams are 2-1 all time against each other. Or Texas is 2-1 all time against Ohio State. One in Ohio State in 2005, 25-22. That was obviously what led the national championship season. I think that was in like week 2 or 3 where they played against one another. And then the following year, obviously Vince Young leaves. Colt McCoy comes in as a freshman, losing that game 24-7 at home in Austin. So both of these two teams have wins on the road against one another. And then obviously 2007, I believe, or 2007 was the Cotton Bowl. No, 2009 was the Cotton Bowl. I don't know why I said 2007 earlier. 2009 Fiesta Bowl for Texas Ohio State in that Fiesta Bowl game that we just spent our time talking about. So, Jake, that's just kind of where we are with these two teams, the history of these two teams. You kind of get these really cool matchups that you don't normally get on a regular basis, and then you've got Notre Dame and Penn State on the other side of the bracket who will play the winner of this game in the national championship. Let's talk a little bit about that Notre Dame Georgia game, just a little bit. Notre Dame, I felt like just kind of outmuscled Georgia. They looked like the stronger, more dominant team. They kind of made it look like it was the Penn State SMU game or Penn State Boise State game, where it was just like whoever won the line of scrimmage dominated that game. And Notre Dame dominated both on the defensive line and the offensive line against Georgia, which to me came as a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect Notre Dame. I picked them to win. I didn't expect them to win win the line of scrimmage, especially on the defensive side of the ball, the way they did. I will say the offensive line didn't dominate that game for them, just because their running came through Riley Leonard making plays on the ground, which was why I picked Notre Dame to win. I thought they could use Leonard. Now, I was pulling out my hair at the start of that game going, why are they just running? Like the first quarter of that game, Notre Dame was just trying to run a standard traditional offense against Georgia. And I was like, no, you need to run Leonard. Run him until he cannot run anymore. And then they started running him, and then they started moving the ball. But that was a weird game because Georgia felt like they were the better team for a lot of that, most of that game. And so I'm glad they lost that, because they won not being the better team on the field in the SEC title game by every statistical metric. And then said, well, we are the better team because we won. And now you have Georgia fans going, we played better than Notre Dame the whole game. We just lost because they had a fumble recovery and a kickoff return for a touchdown. And it's like, oh, it's not so fun when the Rabbits got the gun there, little buddy.
little bro and Georgia. And the conversation of the SEC is dead to me is kind of hilarious to me. Now, yes, we knew, Jake, you and I, we've talked about it since NIL was introduced, since the transfer portal kind of got happening, and things have increased in terms of the activity through the transfer portal and building your team that way, that this was supposed to create parity throughout the league and throughout the entire, college football landscape, whether that be you're in the ACC, whether you're in the Big Ten, whether you're in the SEC or the Big 12, whatever that looks like, and kind of making these super conferences the way they have. It's supposed to create disparity, and that's kind of what we've gotten out of it. And so the saying that the SEC is dead to me is ironic and funny, because you could still have an SEC team winning the national championship because, Texas, but nobody is even considering Texas to be an SEC team. Texas kind of feels like an independent because you don't have the support of the conference. Everyone in your conference is rooting against you this year, which is funny because it's the first time the SEC, it means so much more. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean more, not when Texas is in it. But it's funny to me that this conversation is being had when there's still an SEC team in the Final Four.
Yeah, and Georgia can't even cope with the Carson Beck was out. They didn't run the ball well. Gunnar Stockton was very good in that game. His team let him down.
He was kind of the only reason why they were in that game for a short period of time. And Georgia,
he was 20 at 32 with 234 yards and a touchdown, had a dropped bomb that he threw. He was throwing the deep ball really well. Mm-hmm. Stockton was probably the best player on the field for Georgia on offense by a large margin.
The wide receivers were terrible. The wide receivers dropped passes left and right. I mean, I know they led the nation in drop passes this season as a team, but man, they were not
good. And
the
one drop, the deep pass drop that would have been either a touchdown or put them in the red zone later in the game. That was kind of the final dagger for Georgia in that game. It felt like, but yeah, I mean, Gunnar Stockton was the best player on the field for Georgia, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And it wasn't particularly close, and they lost. So nice to see I was so happy they lost that.
Oh, I was rooting for Notre Dame hard in that game, and I'm not even a Notre Dame fan. In fact, typically more times than not, I root against Notre Dame. That was mostly in the Brian Kelly era, because I don't like Brian Kelly. I don't like him at LSU either. I do like Coach Freeman. I think Freeman is a really good coach for Notre Dame. He fits well. He obviously has bought into the culture, a unique culture, because they are a private school, a Catholic-based school at Notre Dame, and so it takes a unique personality and a unique skill set to sell recruits there, and to build their own culture in Notre Dame. It's a little bit different than everywhere else, and he's done an excellent job of doing that.
He's also just extremely well spoken, very good coach. He had Kirby Smart mad beyond belief with that trick they pulled with having out the punt team, then taking them all off the field, running the offense out on the field. Which, by the way, Kirby Smart was and I'm so glad it happened that way. He was too busy crying and bitching to the ref that he was, and even I sitting on my couch knew, I was sitting there going, just slowly run your players out there. The refs give you as much time as you need to match substitutions to the offense, and they would have just had to take in a delay game. Instead, he's screaming and bitching at the refs, and then the other coaches are just trying to get all the defensive players out there, and then they jump. And that was just hilarious to me because all Kirby Smart does is, for being such a successful coach, and I've talked about, he's the best coach in college football. I'm glad he doesn't coach Texas because he's a crybaby and I can't stand him as a human being.
Yeah.
And he runs a terrible program as far as building players to be better people. Every team's going to have off the field issues. Georgia has a plethora of off the field issues, as we've talked about.
So, Jake, for the first time, one of these head coaches, whether the four remaining, will win a national championship for the first time in their career. So we will have a new head coach as a head coach. Correct. And you also have, Chip Kelly on. Actually, Chip Kelly never won a national championship for Ohio State or for Oregon back in the day whenever he was a head coach. But as a head coach, a first-time national championship winner. Obviously, Steve Sarkisian has it with Alabama, with the Nick Saban team in 2020, I believe. And so it'll be interesting, Jake, moving forward. I want to have a discussion about this 12-team playoff one last time. And now I doubt it'll be the last time, but at least, the last time this week. The 12-team playoff was invented for the Notre Dames and the Ohio States. For the first team, your first team's out in a 4-team playoff. It now proves that Georgia getting the short stick last season and then dominating FSU the way they did, or even an FSU who was the number 5 team, the first team out last year as an undefeated team, just because a quarterback goes down, that you don't deserve a chance, a platform to compete for a national championship. And I think I had it in a different way of, this allows the Boise States to compete. This allows SMU which it does. But we may not ever see that. And that's perfectly fine. But what it does do, it allows Ohio State to represent themselves as the best team in the country. And that's what they've shown in the playoffs as an 8 seed.
And it's kind of funny. You talk about history. You've talked about some history in this show today. Go back to the first college football playoff 4-team format in 2014. Ohio State was the 4 seed, and they absolutely blasted their way to a national title. And that I'm one of those superstitious people when it comes to history repeating itself, especially in sports. That concerns me because this run looks very similar to that. Obviously, there's a lot more games involved now, but Ohio State, and that to everyone was like, this is why the 4-team playoff was created, because you had a team who was, like a 1-loss team in the regular season, gets their chance to play for the national title, and then just buzzsaws everyone. And now you have Ohio State doing this again to start the 12-team era. And it's true, because Ohio State was, at the start of the year, pretty much, I think everyone agreed they're the most talented team in the country. They lose a close game to Oregon. Happens.
At Oregon.
Michigan has some type of voodoo on them, and they lost to Michigan. And then everyone wrote him off. Ryan Day was fired. He was done. His career's over at Ohio State. The football program should be folded. It should all end. They still had a playoff to play, and the players and the coaches knew that, despite the fans not knowing it. And they have annihilated 2 very good football teams back to back. And as a Texas fan going into this game, yeah, I'm concerned. I'm scared. I built this up of like, Texas is the underdog. Like, they'll probably play well. There's also in the back of my mind that this game's just 24-zip, second quarter, it's over. Because that is a possibility with how Ohio State is playing. But that just goes into your point of, this playoff was created for teams like that to be able to have that run, and then also to give the little guys a chance in the Boise States and the SMUs. And
to at least represent themselves as a program.
Get the platform for the opportunity to do it, which a Boise State deserved this year.
100% they did. Now, I do think, however, if you do have a couple of plays that don't go your way, or you screw up, or you trip and over a hurdle throughout the regular season, and you have 2 or 3 losses, and you should go through 3 or 4 playoff teams to advance to a national championship and win. It should be a harder, more difficult road to do that. So I don't mind the 12-team playoff, because it at least provides you a chance to redeem yourself in terms of stacking very impressive wins to prove to everybody, we just had a little bit of a hurdle over here, or we missed a field goal that we shouldn't, have been in a situation to win a game, but we lost by a final second field goal, or whatever the case might be.
We were missing our quarterback for a couple games or whatever it is.
And now we've gotten healthy. Now we're back on track. But we still have to beat a Tennessee. We still have to beat an undefeated Oregon. We still have to beat an SEC championship appearance team in Texas. We still have to beat, whether that be Notre Dame or Penn State, who represented the Big Ten and the Big Ten championship game, or after a slight hiccup against Northern Illinois, Notre Dame has a chance to. What if you had the 5 and 6 ranked team that was ranked that wouldn't have made a 14 playoff play in the national championship in the first year of an expanded playoff?
Well, I mean, all these teams are not the top 4 seeds.
No, well, not the top 4 seeds. They were ranked in the top 4. Texas and Penn State would have made the 14 playoff had it been a 14 playoff format.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, but the first 2 teams out of the rankings in the 14 playoff would have been Ohio State and Notre Dame. If they have a chance to play for a national championship against each other in the first year of a 12-team playoff format, to me, that's enough for me to say it was well worth it.
Yeah, I think the playoff has already been validated as to why there's a playoff. There just needs to be some changes to the format that we have discussed over and over. Everyone has discussed it. I think everyone knows what that needs to be. But the expanding the playoff to me was still the right move. And this shows why, because there's this weird thing in college football. And I guess it comes from there used to never, because every other level of football has this type of tournament at the end. Mm-hmm. But there's this weird belief in Division I football for college football that if you're not undefeated, you don't deserve to play for a national title. And I just
bizarre.
It's bizarre to me because it's not that way at any other level of football.
Well, in this year's case, it would have just been Oregon. So does Oregon not play a national championship and you just gift them the national championship since they finished the regular season undefeated and they were the only undefeated team and they played
because they beat Ohio State by 2 at home. They were much more deserving, and
that was their national championship. But then they turn around and get blasted in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and this is why the Leaches of the world, when he was a coach, was saying, why are we the only level of football that doesn't have a playoff system? You shouldn't have 2 losses and be out. Now, 3 losses in a 12-team playoff, yeah, you probably shouldn't be in unless there's just, a different year where a 3-loss team is just, there's obviously going to be a couple in because there's not as many 1 and 2 loss teams and undefeateds. But this allows you to, in Ohio State to lose a very close game to Oregon on the road, and then drop a puzzling one to Michigan, albeit, but still get that chance to redeem themselves, like you said, and go through. I mean, if they go to the national championship, they'll have had to go through Tennessee, go through Oregon, and go through Texas,
and then
to get the national title,
to get to a title, and then to win a title, whether that be Penn State or Notre Dame. I mean, that's a hell of a gauntlet to win a national championship, and at that point, you can only say, well deserved. You earned it.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with a 2-loss team winning, because to me, having 2 losses in a regular season has never meant that you weren't a potential national title type team. Mm-hmm. It's just always been, to me, we have this really stupid system where before you were just crowned and there wasn't even a national championship game. Then we did the BCS and the computer did it and only 2 teams got to play for it. Then we had a 4-team system where only 4 teams got it. And winning your conference title didn't mean anything. And being a Boise State and going undefeated didn't mean anything.
Right.
Now you have a 12-team playoff system that you can tinker with, mess with the format, mess with how you do rankings, figure all that out. But to me, now there's a foundation there to build college football on. Granted, it's ridiculous it took till 2024 to do it, because I will say it over and over and over again, high school, FCS, Division II, Division III, NAIA, Division I and II, NFL, every other level already freaking had this. So I don't know why there's this belief in fans that's like, well, Ohio State shouldn't even have a chance to play for a national title because they lost 2 games. Why? It's not like that any other level.
At any other level. All right, Jake, let's round out this episode. You have a segment that you want to get into, and it's about Texas Longhorn fans, kind of
fans and Sarkisian.
Critiquing Steve Sarkisian's decision of all gas, no brakes mantra of whether or not, he is living up to those standards of all gas, no brakes.
Yeah, and it's not even saying that there's not individual play calls to critique of Sarkisian. I do think sometimes he just is trying to put a game away and the run game isn't working and he'll stick with it a little too long. But what confuses me is when you have the fans then critiquing that. And I think that there's fair critiques within this little complaint I have here, because there will be fair critiques from those fans, but then those fans will get furious when Quinn throws an interception and go, why is Sarkisian passing it here? Just happened against Arizona State. They tried to set something up. It was there. It was schemed open. Bond was open. There was also other guys open that he could have gone to. Quinn doesn't have to throw the deep ball, by the way. Right. Yes, Sarkisian, it's pretty normal for an offense to have at least one guy on a deep route to not congest the field and have terrible spacing. Quinn saw that he was open, made the correct decision, made a poor throw. So what do you really want all gas, no break, or do you just want great execution to end games, which is not always all on the coaching? No. Because Texas wasn't running the ball well this game. Sark's trying to put the game away. He goes, I'm going to dial up a pass play early in this drive to try to put this game away. And he does that. That's all gas. Then the fan base is furious about that play call. Then you turn around and are going, this all gas, no brakes mantra isn't true because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Do you just mean the execution isn't there? Because I think you're getting confused between what Sarkisian is calling in some of these situations where you're critiquing it and what's actually happening on the field. Because to me, Sarkisian, it's obvious. I think the all gas, no brakes mantra is kind of silly in the standpoint of really what Sarkisian wants to do is run up the score in the first half, run the football the whole second half, win the game. That's not all gas, no brakes because you're changing what you're calling. But
I think his motto has changed a little bit because we don't hear all gas, no brakes very often. That was kind of when he first got to Texas. And now it is very much, I'm going to manage the game in terms of what avenue, what recipe, what equation is best going to equate to us winning this football game. And that is kind of what you said. In a picture perfect world for Steve Sarkisian's game plan, it is Texas be up by 21, 28 points at halftime, run the clock out, maybe not even score another point for the remainder of the game.
Yeah, so I'm just confused of like what exactly they're critiquing, like in this Arizona State game, especially of going, this was not all gas, no brakes. Well, what? Because all of you said he's the biggest idiot in the world after he called a pass play to throw a pass and Quinn throws an interception late in the game. Like, so then if they run the ball there, let's just say he doesn't do that and they run it 3 times and punt it. Then it's, where's the gas? Why are we not throwing the ball? It's like you can't win whenever the players don't execute on the field, which is this. I mean, this offense just has execution problems. If you want to put that on the coach to a point of saying they didn't prepare well enough, which to be fair, they came out and scored in 2 plays. So I think they were prepared, but then I think the players lost focus during the game. And I do think that's something that Sarkisian can improve on. He has to find a way to keep the players focused throughout the game. But from a play calling perspective, I don't think he did anything that screamed that it was terrible play calling within this game.
Well, and let's not forget, Jake, Texas averaged 1.5 yards per carry. So you're not getting a first down if you just run it 3 straight downs. You're just not. And Texas did run it a play before that and got hit at the line of scrimmage, and Wisner got bounced back and lost 2 yards. So there's that aspect to it too. And like you said, there are other players on the field who are running routes that are not 30 yards down the field. There are other check down options. There are other curl options that were either beyond the sticks or just a few yards as a safety valve option. That is every single play Sark has in his passing repertoire of you got a guy on the sideline, a dump off pass, an outlet pass, or you've got a mid-range guy and then a guy deep. It spreads the defense out. That's how you scheme guys open. And Sark has that on almost every single passing play. And I rewatched that play, and you had DeAndre Moore, I think, on the outside on a curl route too. That could have been open if you hit it and time it correctly. Probably would have been good for a first down. Again, that does not come on Sark's decision to call that play. That comes on Quinn's decision to make that throw and to make the right choice to the open receiver and reading the defense properly. I'm not saying he didn't read the defense even properly with the Bond play. Like you said, Bond was open. It was a poor throw. It happens. It sucks that it ended in an interception. It sucks that it gave Arizona State all the momentum in the world. It sucks that Cam Scadaboo 2 plays later throws a 42-yard touchdown pass to essentially, tie this game up. It sucks that those things happen. With all that being said, however, it's not necessarily on Sark when the execution on the field doesn't pay off the way you want it. Like you said, Jake, it goes to your point of, are you mad at the play call or are you mad at the execution of the play call? There's a big difference.
Yeah, it feels like all the blame is always just going to go on the head coach or the quarterback. And in Texas's case, it's just typically both. And also when you're having this much negative discourse about a team, and then I go, Texas is playing to go to a national title on Friday. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And they may lose to Ohio State. Then all those people go, see, we were right. What were you right about?
No, you weren't.
What were you right about? They're in the Final Four teams, and all season you never had joy or
you didn't enjoy this ride. Yeah.
Because you were so mad that they weren't winning how you wanted them to win.
Also,
because Nick Saban and Joe Burrow seasons and things like that have corrupted your mind into that's only what success is. Being in the Final Four this season is a success, even if they lose to Ohio State, by the way.
And also, I just want to say this too. Resume building means shit right now. Wins and loss style points don't mean anything right now at this point in the year. You're not playing to get into a playoff. You're not trying to impress a committee or try to impress voters by getting you a higher rank of who you're playing against, how you're winning these games, and how you look on the field on a week in to week out basis. That doesn't matter anymore. You know what matters right now? Wins and losses. And there are certain points in the NFL season where you see a team struggle. They come out with a great kind of like momentous double overtime victory of sorts in the playoffs. I don't know, a Joe Flacco-led Baltimore Ravens team over a highly favored Denver Broncos team. And then it kind of just catapults this team, whether or not they're the best team in the playoffs or not, of winning their way to a championship. It happens at every level. You may have just witnessed a game in which Texas didn't execute or play their game plan up to their standards, and it only benefits them, almost similar to an Ohio State loss to Michigan to end the season. And now all of a sudden they're playing their best football 4 weeks later.
Yeah, it's such a reactionary world that we live in to everything, and then sports especially, that, you know, Texas, everyone would have said Texas was going to destroy Ohio State in the playoffs 2 weeks ago before the Tennessee game. Everyone going like, well, Texas ends up playing Ohio State. That's an easy run to the national title. Now it's Texas has no chance. There's no world where they beat him. And that might be true. Ohio State might just be an unstoppable buzzsaw right now.
And that's acceptable. That's fine. You know, that's okay.
It's fine, but it's just more of the pretending that being in the Final Four teams 2 years in a row is not a good thing. That some people do. Not everyone does, and a lot of people don't. Our listeners don't. Our comments are typically pretty pro Texas, and you know, being happy with what they're seeing. You know, even in Arizona State game where it's like, if anything, some of our comments in the Arizona State game were just criticisms at what happened during the game, but still being like, I'm damn glad we won. Like that was a hell of a game and we won. And that's where I ended a lot of it. It's like, I can look at that Arizona State game and critique a lot of things from coaching to player execution. But at the end of the day, I'm damn happy they won. And I was in a good mood after they won. Yeah. I may have been in a bad mood during the game. I may have said the game was over multiple times and Arizona State won. You can ride the roller coaster during the game, but enjoy the ride after.
And enjoy the victories, because who knows where this program could be in a couple of years. We think that it's going to be the same, but hey, rumors, knock, knock, knock. Steve Sarkisian, NFL teams are asking for some attention, and you might just give it to them depending on what you do with Texas as the remainder of this season. Now, we'll get into that conversation for another day, but I've heard rumor mill that NFL teams are looking at Steve Sarkisian as an option, and the paycheck is right. Who knows? Now, he has said he wants to stay in college and stay with Texas and win a national championship. That's all fine. He just signed a huge mega deal with Texas a couple years ago. That's perfectly fine and dandy. I'm not against any of it. I'm just saying, enjoy it while you have it, because you don't know whenever it could be gone like that. College football and the NFL football landscape changes in a snap of a finger, and then everything that you know and love right now might not be here the next couple of seasons.
Yeah. I mean, if Texas lost Sark after this season, it would be devastating for the program. It would be absolutely devastating and set them back years.
It would.
And then you have to nail another hire, which is not easy, especially right now. There's not obvious hires unless you're going to somehow poach someone away from a huge school.
Yeah,
which is not easy to do.
Get James Franklin after, who's available that you could get. I don't know if there's anybody the caliber of Steve Sarkisian. I've said it multiple times that he is the best college football coach. Now Kirby Smart has the success to show for it, but I've nailed down that Sark is the best, and I want him as my number one. So with all that being said, Jake, that is going to do it for episode 92 is what we're at here on a Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Our numbers have continued to grow throughout this entire season. We thank you for continuing this ride with us as the Texas Longhorns will play in the semifinal round against Ohio State at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas on Friday, where we will give you our immediate reaction. These episodes will drop Monday through Friday, but Friday being our immediate reaction instead of it being Tuesday through Saturday. So with all that being said, this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. And right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.